Greetings. Our Frederick Riddle here. Christian News and Views, episode 11. And today is Veterans Day. So perhaps you're not at work. Perhaps you're at home and celebrating a Veterans Day. And that is today's news. I'm going to look at the Veterans Day. Unlike Memorial Day, where we honor those men and women who gave all for their country, on Veterans Day, we honor those who have served their country. I'm going to pause here for a drink. I still have my voice problems. Wasn't feeling very well over the weekend. So, but anyhow, Veterans Day is a special day set aside to honor men and women who have served in the armed forces. But let's look a little of a short history here. At the end of World War I, they created what was called Armistice Day. And it was created with the purpose to recognize the ceasing of hostilities. Now look, get this. It was on the 11th month, the 11th day, and the 11th hour. That was very specific. But in 1954, things changed, and Armistice Day was changed to the holiday we now know as Veterans Day. Became a national holiday, and it honors all who have ever served in the armed services, all the way back to the Revolutionary War. And I don't believe we have anybody alive now that dates back that far. I'm told I'm pretty old. Some people say I'm older than dirt, but I don't quite go back that far. But I did serve in the Vietnam War, and we still may have a few. I believe we still got a few people who served in World War II, and then there was the Korean War, and several wars since then. And so we honor them. Now, you might want to say, well, who actually, what armed services do they have? Well, actually, every one. And listen to what we have for our armed services. We have the Air Force. They just fly around. Very well educated. Number one, actually, they say, in the education department. You have the Army. You picture them as, they go in, they're the foot soldiers. They're the ones that go in and they fight in the trenches, and they fight with tanks, and they fight with a variety of weapons, but they're the most vulnerable. There's the Coast Guard that patrols our coasts and is considered a part of the armed forces. But here's one you may not be aware of: the National Guard. The National Guard, every state, I believe, has a National Guard, and you can serve in it. And it's under the control of the governor, but when a war breaks out, that National Guard can be sent, can be reached into, and the men pulled out and used on the front lines. Then there's the Navy. Now, I served for 4 years in the Navy, 1964 to 1968. The Navy, obviously, is on the ocean and the seas and everything thereabouts. And they on top of the ocean, and they also go under the ocean with submarines. Then you have the newest one is called the Space Force, and this was made a department by President Trump. I don't think it was considered I don't even think it existed before President Trump. He fought for it and got it, and now it is a respected part of the armed forces. So that's Air Force, Army, Coast Guard, Marines, National Guard, the Navy, and the Space Force. 7 altogether. Every person that serves there deserves to be honored. Now, I mentioned that my years of service. I am proud of my service. I was a radioman, and that doesn't mean I worked with the radio, though. Actually, I was trained to do some Morse code. I never used no Morse code once I got out of school. That's primarily modern services, primarily for communication to ships at sea, um, especially submarines, and they may use it for other things as well. And but what I worked with was teletype machines. So we would get all these messages over, had to process them and get them out. So a question comes up: why should Christians serve in the military? You could also add another one: is it okay to serve in the military? Well, I'm going to just invite you to look it up for yourself. I'm going to tell you where to look. Okay? In the Old Testament, we are told of David slaying Goliath. Now, you think of him as a shepherd boy, and he was. His father sent him. But David volunteered to go out and fight Goliath. That made him an automatic member of the military. I'm using what would happen today. I'm assuming that's what happened then. But in effect, that's exactly what he did. He went out there. In fact, King Saul wanted to give him his weapons. And the thing is that not his weapons, his armor. And his armor didn't fit. Now, excuse me, I hate to do this, but I have to. So, hopefully I won't have to do that again. So right off the bat, we're told that David slew Goliath, and he had other relatives who also slew giants. That was part of their army. It was it was a required thing. In the Old Testament, they were required, they were expected to serve, but they didn't have a draft. Just every male person. They didn't have to be drafted. Every male person was expected to serve, and if they became a parent, they were given time off for that. Pretty generous, actually, but far more generous than modern services are. Israel in the Old Testament, like I said, men were expected to serve, not women. Back in those days, women didn't really serve, but you do have different occasions where women slew the enemy. And so if you want to consider that part of the military, you can. They were fighting. What they were doing was patriotic. Moving to the New Testament, you go to Matthew chapter 8, and you look through the first verse 8 through 13. And what we have there is a story of a centurion who came to Jesus. He had a servant who was sick, and he wanted that servant who he loved. He wanted that servant to be healed. And he came. He traveled on his own. He didn't send some messenger and say, "Come to my house, I need to talk to you." He didn't do that. He went to Jesus. He was a humble man. But he was also a man of faith. He talked about how he gave commands and people did what he said. He says, and I know you can do the same thing. You are God. You give commands and this is going to happen. You can heal my servant right here, right where you're at. Jesus marveled at that. Now, didn't Jesus not know this? Yes, he knew it. But in his humanity, he marveled. Not he was shocked. He just marveled at the faith. And he testified of it. He had never heard of anybody, any human, especially his own disciples, had never expressed that kind of faith. That's amazing. In Ephesians chapter 6, most of you would be probably aware of that, verses 10 through 18. There you have the armor. Everywhere, from the sword, the shoes, even to the modern soldier has a little bitty radio attached to his shoulder. In World War II, they had walkie-talkies. Back then, they might have had smoke or something like that they used to communicate. That's a part of the armor. You have to be able to communicate to your commanding generals. And so all the armor is mentioned. Why, if it wasn't okay, why would God use the military as an example of what we as Christians are to be Christian soldiers for the Lord? 2 Timothy, you go there. In chapter 2, verses 3 to 4, we are told to serve Christ as a good soldier. Men and women have served this country with distinction. We owe them our thanks. And that is something that you and I need to really be willing to do. Don't put them down for serving. You know, when I went in, I knew some guys who were either one step ahead of the law or one step behind me. Some of them were sentenced to serve. But you know what? They got in that service and they became soldiers. Do we honor them? Yes, we do. The military has a way of straightening a person out. It actually worked on me. Now, you might debate that, but it worked on me too. I wasn't a criminal. I wasn't anything like that. But I didn't have the maturity that I needed. And you gain a lot of maturity when you're in service. You gain a lot of habits you shouldn't have, and you need to get rid of as soon as you can. But serving in the military develops character, and it helps you to take your role as a adult. And nowadays we have the military for men and for women. Both can serve, both can risk their lives, both should be honored and respected. So on this day, Veterans Day, I'm encouraging you to honor them in some way. So you might go to an event or something of this nature. I don't care. It's not what you do. You might stay home all day, but you should think about them. Maybe even pray for them or something of that nature. The idea here is, and it should be an attitude that we should have all year long. These are men and women who are putting in the time. You may be a young person in college right now. You're not serving in the military. Doesn't mean you're bad. No, it doesn't. But you should be glad, because what they are doing, they are defending your right to be in school and to study and to maybe learn about a career. Or maybe you're trying to apply and start a job, or maybe start a business or something like that. These people are out there serving in the military, giving up anywhere from, if it depends upon what you're in. If you're in the reserves, you can actually do both, and you go in on the weekends and so forth like that. I was telling somebody that he didn't particularly care for the idea, but when I was in the service, we used to call them 2-week wonders. And he said, no, they're not 2-week wonders. There's two-week special or something like that. It was a much greater term. And I won't argue that. They still gave up time. They went, they gave up time, usually on the weekends, in which they would go and learn how to, not just march. They had to learn what we were in the boot camp, we had to learn. They had to learn the same things, and to learn to serve, to obey, and to do what their commanding officer wanted them to do. You should honor them. And so I just invite you to think about that, and especially think about Christians. We are in two armies. You can be, rather. I served in the Navy. I was not a Christian at the time. But you can serve in the U.S. Armed Forces and in God's Armed Forces at the same time. From the moment you got saved, you became a soldier for Christ. Now, what's your weapon? The sword of the Lord, the Word of God. And what are you trying to do? You're not trying to conquer nations like taking land. You're trying to conquer souls for Christ. giving them the gospel, letting them know there is hope, there's a God who loves you and wants to give you eternal life. And what do you have to do? Simply ask him into your heart, believing, trusting in him according to the scriptures. So you do that. And you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode. Oh, by the way, before I sign off, don't forget down below, we have given you the opportunity. If you enjoy these messages, these podcasts, just click on there and subscribe. And you can select notifications and stuff like that too, but definitely subscribe. You have a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode.